has expired, now known as DBS, which is their police check, then we don't promote them anymore. They have to get themselves back up to speed before they get back onto the website. So out of our 45 that we have, I would say that realistically we've only really got maybe 15, 17 that I would class as active, that are actually out there doing things. We've also got additional people that we have trained in the past who are not trading as NLP4Kids, but they have had the training with us and then gone off and just woven the skills into something that they're doing already. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. Okay. We also work with parents and teachers, as you probably know, and we work with other organisations who work with children and young people. Sometimes that's delivering workshops, sometimes it's delivering one-to-one sessions, sometimes that might be in the community, sometimes it might be in a school. Alright? So I'm going to talk you through the 3 different levels of training that we have available for you. But first off, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. So my name is Gemma, if I didn't tell you already. I am one of the co-founders of NLP4Kids, and I'm currently the sole director of the company as well. My background is with very young children. I trained as a nursery nurse a very long time ago, and I started working with little people in day nurseries, in school, in nannying, so in private family type settings. I worked as a community nursery nurse with the NHS and the health visiting team, so lots of different contexts. And I ended up in a role as a nursery manager in a private day nursery for the largest childcare organisation in the UK, and I was their youngest ever nursery manager. When I went into that role, that particular nursery hadn't had a manager in place for a long time. They had a series of managers going on maternity leave, and so they'd been unmanaged for a significant period of time. And just to put that into some kind of context, in a nursery, do you think I'm mainly working with men or women? Women. Would you say under or over the age of 30? Under. Yeah, so it's young girls, and they hadn't had a manager, and then I showed up and went, and this is what we're going to do, and they all looked at me rather suspiciously. We had an additional challenge in that we had a creche facility attached to our nursery as well, and our creche facility was open at the weekends. So at the weekends, I was encouraging my staff, these young ladies under the age of 30, to come in and do some shifts on a Saturday and a Sunday. Imagine how that one went down. So typically what would happen is they would be struck with this mystery illness that involved nausea, headaches, faint smell of vodka on the breath, and it became a real challenge to actually get people showing up on the weekend shifts. So in that situation, I have to either find someone else to do it, or I do it myself. Which one do you think happened? I did it myself, yeah. So then I was very quickly working 7 days a week. Now, whilst the creche shifts on the Saturday and Sunday were just half days, to leave the building, I had to walk back past my office. My office, which on a Saturday and Sunday was quiet. And there's that big stack of things that I'm supposed to be doing sitting on the side there and the phone isn't ringing. So it was the perfect opportunity to do a little bit of catch-up work as well. So very soon, I was doing 7 full working days a week. And someone said to me, if you don't slow down soon, you're going to get sick. And I said, I'll slow down when I get sick. Guess what happened? Yeah, I got sick. Yeah, and I didn't just get a little bit sick, I really went for it. And I had appendicitis. And I ended up being signed off work for a month. And it was during that month, whilst I was convalescing at home with Richard and Judy on the television, that I saw Paul McKenna on TV, and he had abandoned all of that funky stage show stuff that he was doing in the 80s, and was doing this new thing called NLP. And he worked with a lady on the TV show who had something called agoraphobia. Have any of you heard of that before? Yeah. So she hadn't left her house for a very long time. And they interviewed her and they then they got Paul McKenna to go and do some stuff with her, which was probably a day's work or so. And then they filmed her walking along the embankment of the River Thames to the television studios. And they filmed her getting in the lift and going up to the This Morning film studios, and then she sat down and had another interview with Richard and Judy right there live on TV. And I thought, wow, that is good stuff. That's really good stuff. And we just had the internet installed at home at that point in time, so I started to do some research, and I started looking into it a bit more. And I don't know how many of my other NLP people started off by doing some research into NLP and sort of went down a rabbit hole that you didn't come back out of yet, yes. So that was what happened for me too. So from there, I ended up going off and doing a course in NLP and hypnotherapy, and got myself a certificate. Not actually that certificate. They would give me that one. From there, I decided that I was going to set myself up with my own business as a coach and a therapist using NLP and hypnotherapy. And so I did the next most logical thing, which was to get myself a business phone. Because in my mind, I thought, now I've got my qualifications and my details with the GHR and the ANLP and, all of these other places, they're going to come flocking, right? They're going to be banging the door down. Well, what actually happened was I ended up ringing my phone from another phone just to check that the phone worked. And sadly it did. So what that meant was there was something missing. What was the missing thing? The marketing, yes. What I did do was I did get myself a website, because I thought that was the marketing bit. The website that I got was quickly superseded by this new kid on the block called Google. This new thing suddenly arrived on the planet called a Google, and actually your website was useless unless you were friends with Google. And I wasn't, and I recognised that. And I met a guy who said to me that he could get me to the top page of Google, and then they would come flocking for the sum of £250 every month. Now, actually what happened was I did get to the top page of Google. If you typed in hypnotherapy and NLP, open bracket, neuro-linguistic programming, close bracket, in Hemel Hempstead, Hertfordshire, England, UK, then I was page 1, slot 1 on Google. But obviously not many people were actually typing that in, so it didn't really sort the marketing issue out. So my initial investments looked something a little bit like this. I obviously made investments in my training. I've done lots of retraining since then to the sum of around £16,000. I wasted an awful lot on bad marketing ideas because I just didn't get it. I didn't know what I needed to do. However, I have since gone on and invested in proper marketing training so that I do know what I'm doing a little bit more now. And it's an evolving thing, stuff changes all the time, social media starts doing new things. We'll talk a bit more about that this afternoon. But I wanted you to know that it wasn't kind of instant and it wasn't a quick fix thing. There was a lot of learning curves, and the learning curves continue. So, let me tell you about who we are and what we do. We have 3 levels of training at NLP4Kids. The first one is our silver level training. You should all have one of these that we gave you this morning in your seats. In there, I want you to take a look at the yellow sheet, which is that one. Okay, so that's the silver level training, which is what we're just going to talk about right now. With this level of training, you are able to host NLP4Kids workshops in your local community, go out to schools and deliver our term time programs, and work with young people on a one-to-one coaching basis as well. The training is 4 days. It starts on a Saturday and finishes on a Tuesday, so it's 4 consecutive days. You do have to do the NLP practitioner home study and test paper first before you arrive on those 4 days training. And our next training is February next year. You've missed the boat for the last one of this year, okay? So the next one will be Feb next year. The first 2 days, we go through our workshop content. What it is, how you do it, why we do it like that, and what challenges you're going to get when you're doing it. Day 3 is all about one-to-one sessions with young people. how to structure your consultations, how to structure your sessions, keep to your time frames so that you don't overrun, evaluate the sessions afterwards, interacting with other professionals that might be involved with the child, and so on. And then day 4 is our business marketing and setup day. This particular slide is to remind me to tell you about a little boy that I worked with called Lewis. And Lewis was adopted into his family because he'd been abused by his original family members, his birth family, such that it had left him with some learning disorders. So he had a little bit of damage to his brain, which meant that his learning abilities were slower. He also had some physical impairments as well. He had some problems with his spine. He had some issues with his eye, all as a result of the abuse that he had experienced. And when his mum brought him to see me, she told me in great detail about this abuse that he had experienced in front of him. And I can see you all going, oh, no. Now the truth is that I get that, but I didn't stop her because I could see he'd heard it 100 times before already. He'd heard it over and over and over again. It didn't really mean anything anymore. He'd been through CAMS, and don't get me wrong, I'm not here to say that CAMS is bad or wrong or anything like that. There's great practitioners out there, but they hadn't quite found either the right service or the right person to work with him, I guess. So he had had lots of different therapists and ologists over the years, and the reason why he ended up going back again was because he had reoccurring phobias, like all sorts of different phobias, but always a phobia. So scared of the dark, scared of lifts, scared of escalators. He had all sorts of different ones. But the day that he came to see me, the issue was a fear of travellers. Now, he lived around the corner from a traveller site, so you can kind of understand why that might be something that was on his radar. And he was concerned that when he was, going to the shops or going out to play, that he might bump into a traveller, and that they might intimidate him, they might even beat him up. And his fear was such that he no longer walked himself to school in the mornings. He wouldn't go out with his friends anymore. He wouldn't do anything outside of the house independently. So it was really getting in the way of him, becoming independent. So I did some sessions with him, and one of the things we did in session number 2 was something called a swish pattern. Who here is familiar with a swish pattern? Okay, good. For those of you who are not, I'm going to give you the quickest ever explanation of what a swish pattern is. So here's what you do. You have someone who has some kind of a trouble, and you get them to picture that negative thing in their mind, on a screen in their mind, nice and big. They see a big picture of it. But in the lower left-hand corner, you have a better picture, something that they would like to see or experience instead. Then you have them explode that new picture over the top of the old one really quickly as swish, so that all they can see is the good picture now. Make sense so far? Yeah? Then we clear the screen so there's nothing there, and we repeat the process. We do it lots and lots and lots of times, and we get faster and faster. So one of the good things that happens is it gets a bit silly, a bit giggly, and your words will get confused, and all of these sorts of things happen. So you end up kind of sticking fun and laughter to it as well. What happens for the brain is every time it tries to do this negative picture, very quickly gets replaced with a more positive one. So I used this particular pattern with Lewis. When we got to the end of our session, I said to him, tell me, what's the difference between how you were when you very first came to see me, that very first day that we met, and how things are for you now? What's changed? And because of his learning difficulties, he found it difficult sometimes to express what was really going on, and to say how things had changed for him emotionally. So he gave me one of the best analogies that I've ever had. He said, when I very first came to see you, my problems were as big as a skyscraper. But now, it's just one brick. How good is that? And when his mum came in at the end of the session, I told her what he said, and she said, I think you might have saved his life. And that certainly don't forget about them. So that's one of the sorts of things that you can be doing with the young people that you work with. The other thing we do is workshops in our local community. As you can see, that's not a very local community. This was actually NLP4Kids in Kuwait, and this is us again in Kuala Lumpur. And because we don't geographically restrict our practitioners, you can work anywhere in the world that you want to. So when this kind of stuff comes up, you can take it. One of our practitioners is going to be back in Kuala Lumpur early next year delivering kids because we've been invited again. Yes, Diana.
How can you use that in a foreign language? Does it work?
They will speak in English.
They will speak in English.
My Arabic is not good.
Yeah. For instance, if you took your knowledge to a country of Spanish or what, you wouldn't be able to do that in Portuguese or Spanish, would you? It doesn't work.
I think there are versions of NLP certainly that have been translated. I know in Spain and in France there is a big NLP community over there. So I imagine that it could be, but I personally haven't done that.
Can I chip in? I've just been doing some NLP training in California, and there were 30 different nationalities, a lot of people from China, the Far East, all taking it back to their country to do it in their native language.
Oh, brilliant.
So and a lot of Spanish-speaking people as well.
Yes.
And there's a lot of literature out there in the different languages if you're bilingual.
Okay.
I think, is it in Spanish, it's NPL instead of NLP, so we do sometimes get emails from there saying, no, it's PNL. PNL, there we go. So, the Kuwait one was quite a random thing. I got a phone call one day from a lady. She said, I have a training centre out here. I'd like you to come and teach NLP4Kids. And I was in the gym at the time, and you get lots of weird phone calls when your number's on the internet. So I just went, yeah. And then I got back and I had an email from her and it said, we're really looking forward to you coming to Kuwait. And I went, yeah. It wasn't until we were on the aeroplane I went, oh my gosh, we're going to Kuwait, what are we doing? So we've been out there a couple of times now. The Kuala Lumpur one was in conjunction with another event called Power to Achieve, which some of you may have heard of with a chap called Andy Harrington. He was running Power to Achieve out in Kuala Lumpur. Whilst he was doing that, I was taking the children of the parents that were in the Power to Achieve event and doing NLP4Kids with them in the next room. So that was us out there. And then we also do our thing in schools as well. Here we go. So one of the very first schools that we ever worked in was a school called Latham High in Lancashire. And that's one of the poorest postcode areas of the country. So these kids are tough out there. The ones that we were working with were aged between 13 and 16. There was about 20 of them. And they were the first in their family to have the potential to go on to higher education in the future. So the school had asked us in to do some confidence building, self-esteem building type stuff with them, which we did. I'm not going to lie to you, they were a tough crowd. You know, they were frosty. It took a while to warm those guys up that day, but it worked. We were with them for 4 hours, and this was the feedback that we got from them. So in which areas of your life will you use the skills you learned? I think I will use what I did today in studies and in general life. Pretty good. This young person talked about their attitude and said, I can control it and have strategies for feeling the way I want to. Not bad. This one said, I will be more open-minded. 13 to 16 years old, may I remind you. Teenagers are from a different planet. This is amazing. This one said, I will think a lot more about body language and tones of voice. That tells you some of the specific things we covered that day. This one said, because it shows I don't have to doubt myself. And this is my favourite. I will be thinking nothing is impossible. Another legal high moment right there. Good stuff. Alright, so I've told you lots of reasons why I think this is good. What I'm going to do now is to share with you a video of some young people and they can tell you for themselves what they think about it.
Well, basically, remembering it. Because at first I wasn't really very good at remembering, but now I think it is a lot better. But I can ask my unconscious what I was questions. Well, person who was teaching me was very good. I think he was really nice to us. And she did it. She was really good. Yeah, she's very, very clear. She talks about big things and just words. I liked her. She was really funny and she did like when the lesson was taught, she was really fun. The person who was teaching NLP there was really, really nice and helpful. Yes, I loved her. I would love to learn what NLP is teaching because it's a very good thing to learn.
I love that I get a proper appraisal in there. Yeah, she should do it again. Alrighty, so let's move on, and I'm going to talk to you about NLP for parents and teachers, which you will find on the pink sheet in your workbook. So that is the gold level training. With the gold level training, it includes the silver bit as well. So if you do the gold level training, you also get the bit that we just talked about. Make sense? Yeah? Alright.
Sorry, can I just so you don't do silver first and then gold, you can go straight to gold?
I would recommend doing silver then.
Oh, so you do them separately, but it's sort of this one.
Exactly, yeah. So it's an additional 4 days, this one. Again, starts on a Saturday, finishes on a Tuesday. And it's normally a couple of months after having done the silver bit. Okay, so I think the next one of this one is in April next year. Okay, so let's talk about this because someone asked me about this earlier. I think it was you, Zaymar, saying how does this fit in with parents? You know, we need to include them too. There was a young man that I worked with who had some anger management issues. He was about 13 years old. And when his mum phoned me, it kind of set some alarm bells ringing for me because she said, I want you to hypnotise him and make him stop. And I said, well, it's not really like that. That's not exactly what we do. And I'm happy to explore using hypnosis with him, but it's never the first thing I do. We're going to be building rapport first. We're going to make sure we like each other. Then we're going to set some goals and talk about actually what does he really want. I want to make sure that he's motivated, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so he came to see me. We did a session together, and I did something with him. This is a technique that I completely claim ownership for myself, but I probably picked it off someone else if I'm honest. I've called it the path of life. What we do is we have our young person identify the key things that have happened in their life so far. So this is like a timeline, if you like. So we start off, and they're probably about here right now, and they've got some choices about what's going to happen for them next. Let's say that there are 2 different paths that they get to choose between. There is this path, which is the one where they carry on doing what they've been doing already. And then we think about all of the significant things that would ordinarily happen in a young person's life, like taking your exams, or getting your first car, getting your first job, those sorts of things. And we say, well, what are those going to look like if you carry on doing what you're doing at the moment? What will those exam results come out like? What's that first job going to be then? What does that mean the first car will end up looking like? What kind of a boyfriend or a girlfriend are you going to have? And so on. And we go all the way up to the end of their days. Then we say, okay, let's choose an alternative. Let's say that you do something different. Maybe we start to do things in a better way. Now what would life look like? And again, we mark out all of the same significant events. What will the exam results be? What will the first job be? What's the first car? And so on. So it's a really useful opportunity to help build leverage for them. It's to get motivation going and to have them buy into the idea that doing something different and having an alternative might actually be incredibly helpful for them and poses the prospect of a better future. So I use this technique with him. And he was fired up by the end of it. You know, he was like, I want to do this, I need to do this, I want the results that this is going to bring. We got Mum in at the end of the session, and he said, right, this is what I've done today. He talked it through it. He said, I've got this option here, or I changed things, and I've got this option here, and this is what I want it to look like. And Mum said, he's done all this kind of stuff before, it didn't work then, and it won't work now. my eye, I could see him sitting in the chair over here and sinking further and further and further down with every word that she said. When they left, what they didn't know was that my assistant passed them in the corridor. They didn't know who she was. So Sophie came in and said, "Oh my God, was that boy your client?" And I went, "Yeah, why?" And she went, "Wow, he was really laying into his mum out there. He said to her, 'You can't speak to me like that. I can't believe you embarrass me like that. How dare you trample on my dreams like this. You embarrassed me speaking to that woman in that way.'" Really went for her. So the thing was, I didn't resolve the anger management issue clearly, but he did learn something about enforcing boundaries. I didn't see him again. Mum didn't bring him back. And at that point, I recognised that actually we can only do so much with the young people themselves. And if we don't also put something in place for the environmental factors, so the parents, the teachers, and extended family and so on, then actually our results might end up being a bit limited. So that's why we put in NLP for parents and teachers as well. Okay? So here's what we're going to do with this. I'm going to give you an opportunity to play with one of the fundamental pieces of NLP. This is called the communication model. And for me, this sits underneath everything that we do. It's really useful as a diagnostic tool for working with people as well, to get them taking responsibility and realising what things they're doing or not doing that's supporting a problem. I'm going to talk you through how it works, and then I'm going to give you a couple of contexts, and I want you to see how this fits in with those contexts and what's really happening there. So if we say this here is you, outside of you, where it says external event, that just means life. There is life happening outside of you every second all the time. You should be able to look around the room and see some signs of life with any luck. Look away if you do it. You take that information from life into your brain in 5 ways only. Who can tell me what the 5 ways are? Yes, senses. Yeah, you're seeing it, hearing it, smelling it, tasting it, feeling it, that's it. As that information is coming into your nervous system, you are being bombarded with sensory information. It's coming from every angle. We don't know how much you're processing, but it's estimated it's somewhere between 2 million and 2 million bits of information per second that's coming in. That's a lot of stuff. Now, can anyone here think about 2 million things from one moment to the next? No. 2,000? 200? No chance. You actually only process about 7 bits that you then have left over for your thinking and for your focus. So what we know is that there's tons coming in, but you're only left with a fraction of it. And that means that stuff's going missing. Information is disappearing, and that's because you are filtering it. And these are the 3 filters that we're going to talk about today. So the first one is that some stuff gets deleted, just outright it disappears. An example of that could be if you say to your partner, have you seen the ketchup? Because I've looked in the cupboard and it's not there. And then they go to the cupboard and they look and they go, well, what's that then? It was there the whole time in front of your face, but in your world it didn't exist. Now sometimes that happens because you have a very strong belief that something is not there. And when you strongly believe that something is not there, you might not see it. You might make a hallucination that wipes it out of your field of vision. So you don't see it there. Sometimes we don't see stuff because we're too busy thinking about other things and our brain's getting filled up with other content, so we just miss it. But we do delete stuff. It's one of the biggest ways in which we filter information is by deleting. The next one is distorting. Now this one's about making things either much better or much worse than they really are. And you do that using your imagination. So if you've read a good book and you get an idea about how the characters look, how their voices might sound, and then depending on what happens to them in that story, it might make you laugh out loud, it might make you cry, but ultimately you are just reading black characters on a white page. It's your imagination that brings it to life and creates a movie in your mind. And then you might go to the cinema where they've made it into a movie and you sit there and watch it and go, well, that was shit. Because it's not the same as the movie that you had in your head and it doesn't match up for you. So that's how we use distortion. And then the third one is always, never, all the time. Now, generalizations are useful for you because it means you can stick loads of stuff together, make your communication much more slick and clear and easy. So if I said to you, for example, I'm always late for work, it's not technically true, but it's easier for me to communicate that message than if I said, I'm late for work except on the school holidays when the A41 is much clearer and then I can get to work on time. That's like word vomit, it's too much. So just say I'm always late for work. Now the challenge with that is that if I keep saying it a lot over and over again, after a while my brain loses the motivation to get me out of bed on time because it assumes I'm always late anyway. So our generalizations can trip us up as well as being useful for us. They're useful for helping us link new stuff to stuff we already know about, which makes learning happen faster. So when you came here today, you've maybe not seen those particular chairs before, but you still knew what to do with it because you link it up to your old reference for chair, which means you don't have to relearn a chair every time you encounter a new one, which is quite handy. So those are your filters. You've got the stuff coming in, it goes through that filtering process so that you're left with about 7 bits of information that you use to create what's called here an internal representation. It's actually better said as an internal representation because you're representing to yourself life from the outside, inside, but only with the bits that you've got left. There was tons going on out there, but you filtered it and filtered it so that you've got just a tiny sliver of it left over for your thinking. And that thinking has an effect on your emotional state, so how you feel about it. And your emotional state has an impact on your physical body. Now those 3 things have those arrows there to show that they're interlinked. They all affect each other, which means that if you change one of them, it has an impact on the other 2. So if, for example, we had someone who was doing the state of depression, what would a good doctor tell them to do before they just dished out drugs? What would they tell them to do? Something there.
Exercise.
Do some exercise, exactly. Yeah, when they do some physical exercise, they change how their body is moving, it releases chemicals in their brain, it changes their thinking, and their state can start to elevate and improve. Alright? Now you can't stay in there the whole time, you have to do stuff in the outside world as well. So depending on how this is set up, this will impact how you behave and react in the outside world, what you end up doing. And that then gives you your result, which might be a good result, might be a shockingly bad result, but you still get a result at the end of it. And you'll then see that result, take it back into your brain, take that information back in, and it goes back through the process again. Everyone with me so far? Good. Now it's your turn. I want you to work with someone else, and I want you to look at this statement, my teenage son never listens. Together I want you to figure out what stuff is this parent deleting. What is the parent distorting? What generalizations is this parent making? What kind of thinking might they have left over by the end of it? What kind of an emotional state is that parent going to be in? What physical presence would we notice about that parent? So what might we see in their body? How are they going to behave? And what result will that bring for